All right, so first I think we introduce ourselves. I'm Ziping Mao, I'm a PhD student in mechanical engineering, and I went to the McKinsey Insight program last year, so 2017. It's in June and in Washington, D.C. It was a great experience, so it's a full 3-day event. And during the time, we were exposed to a real case, more like a real case setup, and we talked to different consultants, which was a great experience.
So I'm Matthew Tedesco. I'm also a PhD student in mechanical engineering. I also went to the Insight program with Zipping, and we can talk all about it. I think he's already kind of outlined a lot of the highlights.
Okay, so I'm Jason. I'm the chair of the professional development team, and I didn't go to Insight or Bridge because I'm a master in statistics, and I'm going to join the Deloitte Consulting Shanghai office this fall. So if you have any questions about a full-time application, I'm here to help.
Yeah, so I guess what might be a little bit helpful, just to give you an idea first, is just kind of what the Insight program looks like, bare bones. So Zipping already kind of mentioned a couple of things. So what ends up happening is you show up basically for a weekend. You'll be given a case similar to the one that you've been solving so far. The difference is that what they're going to do is they're going to spend a lot more time trying to get you to work with a team. So you're going to spend one day developing your structure, one day developing how you're going to interview kind of mock candidates, like mock CEOs, CFOs, and then you'll actually do the interviews. You'll spend a couple days analyzing, and then that final day you'll then present to the board effectively. So it's a really good experience to start to see what is it like to truly be a consultant. What's the daily regime look like?
Yeah. And to add on that, actually I feel like this experience is very valuable to me, actually in 3 aspects. The first one is you get to ask questions, a lot of questions, no matter
Like a lot of questions.
Yeah, no matter it's smart questions or stupid questions. Trust me, actually, if you spend 3 days with consultants, you're going to ask some stupid questions, right? But it doesn't really matter because you have a very close relationship with them at that point. And the second one is actually you get exposed to a real consulting experience. So compare with doing this kind of short cases, like half an hour each that you do in your day-to-day life in the case practice. That experience was more like a full experience. So collecting data, presenting that to the board, that's not something that you can experience in a 30-minute case. And the very last one is about connected with different people. Because right now you just are connected with Duke students who are interested in consulting, but in the Insight program, actually you get connected with all the students in the United States, basically. A lot of them are from the most prestigious universities, of course, including Duke. And I feel like that one was also valuable, and some of the teammates are still connected with me, and we have phone calls from time to time.
And the nice part with that is that now you actually have more case practice partners. So at the end of the day, like I remember I did a lot of case practice with a couple people from my team.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that they really get you to interact with the consultants is, you have your team, but then you have your engagement manager effectively. And that's one of the actual consultants from McKinsey. So they kind of sit with your team during the entire time. Their job is not to solve the problem. Their job is to facilitate your problem solving. So for those of you that went to the info session, you might remember Stephen Clark. So he was my engagement manager. And he was just as much energetic as he was during the info session. Not surprising. And he taught me a lot of things. The biggest thing was he kept telling us to fail fast. It's better to do it quickly and wrong and then have somebody tell you why it's wrong and get feedback on that than to spend hours upon hours trying to make it perfect and then get feedback. Because if you fail fast, you won't waste all of that time. And that's something that's really hard for PhD students especially, because I know from experience that you want to get everything perfect and then go talk to your advisor. That doesn't really apply here. And so you do learn some lessons that you wouldn't learn just from getting a PhD.
Yeah, I do agree with Matt. So In consulting work, so at first you definitely do, I have to say most things wrong. Like even you spend like 8 hours doing a simple project, it's still wrong. But you have to talk to the engagement manager, talk to senior people about that, and so that they can correct your mistake, and you can, for the next time, you'll be able to do it faster and do it correctly. So fail is, it's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I really like that point, Jason. So actually, even in the case interview, during the 30 minutes, one of the traits that your interviewer are looking at is whether or not you are coachable. Coachable means that they correct you, and you can realize that and correct yourself actually very quickly. Because you can imagine that if you're on a team and your manager is trying to correct you, but you're trying to be defensive, this is going to last forever, this project, right? So they want to find coachable people.
And that comes in a lot of different forms. So I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to be working with these people getting feedback. And so what I would do to kind of put a twist on what Zipping has said is you want to envision the case that you're solving as not an interview. Okay, it's a true problem-solving session, and you're sitting down with your engagement manager trying to solve the problem. If you think of it as an interview, you think that there's a correct answer. But here's the dirty secret. There is no correct answer. Okay, the real thing that you're trying to do is come to a logical conclusion. And they're there to help you because they've had years of experience, because they've had a problem. They might have even solved that problem. So if you think of it as an actual problem-solving session, what ends up happening is it kind of puts the whole interview on its side, and now you're sitting alongside somebody. And then questions that ask for feedback, like what do you think, become natural. Because have you ever thought once before to just ask your interviewer, so what do you think of that solution? What do you think of that approach? It's so obvious when you hear it, but when you try it, it feels weird. But it's really helpful. And also not to mention that at this thing, you also get to go to some awesome dinners, right? You get to go on. You really liked the
cruise dinner.
The cruise
Yeah.
dinner.
That you were tried to get across that you thought were particularly important in those insights and Bridge to BCG programs, as opposed to a regular interview and prepping your resume to hand out for that?
So to be honest, I would say I can't see any difference between applying for this program and a full-time job. Plus, I think, Matt, you didn't even submit your cover letter, right?
Oh yeah, McKinsey didn't even require it at the time, so I just gave him my resume and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
While we're on it, that was another question I had. I noticed that one of them, I can't remember if it was BCG or McKinsey, but one of them had a cover letter as optional. And so it sounds like...
It's probably
that
McKinsey.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like that isn't actually like required, but...
Yeah. It's something where, and I was probably an exception to the rule, like obviously the cover letter will be helpful to at least get your point across, but it's not absolutely necessary, like if you don't send it in, they won't take you or something along those lines. Yeah. The key is, and Zipping already said it, the key is that you still want to show them why you want essentially a job there. This is almost like a summer internship, a weird summer internship, but one nonetheless. Yeah.
When they're making their decision on who to admit for the summer program, what do you think are the most important things that they're looking for?
I mean, for consulting as an industry, actually, they are constantly looking for the same things, right? Teamwork, the entrepreneur drive, and also personal impact. So no matter it's in the cover letter, in the resume, or their interview, they are constantly looking for the same things. You just have to show the three aspects to them in different angles.
And actually what he just said, so if you go on McKinsey's website, those are the three aspects you're going to find, okay? Personal impact, entrepreneurial drive, and leadership experience. So those three things, as Jason was saying with the stories, those could be your three prongs, right? When they ask a question, it's probably going to be leading towards one of those three things. And so your story should be highlighting at least one of those three.
Yes. And in terms of prepare a resume, you should probably focus on those areas as well. So when you describe what you do in the lab or in your internship, try to apply those focus areas to your resume. So then that makes your resume stronger.
Yeah.
Was there a phone interview for these programs?
Yeah. So it was more like a mini mini case at the end, and then some personal experience questions. It really wasn't like your traditional interview, like we were just talking about, like a fit interview. It was a lot more kind of informal questions. But at the end of the day, and this kind of goes back to the question that you asked earlier, what they're looking for is some people who are curious about consulting, right? They've shown some relative interest in consulting by doing things, right? Whether that be interacting with the consulting club, whether that be doing some cases, whether that be joining one of the micro consulting teams. And they're also very interested in being a consultant. But maybe, and this is okay, to not know a lot about it yet, right? That's the whole point of Insight or Bridge to BCG, is to show you what it's like. So it's okay to not know everything about consulting, and to maybe even say that, right? You're interested, but I don't know everything about McKinsey, but I want to. Mm-hmm.
As far as case practice and kind of getting good at it, getting consistent and efficient with how you approach it, do you believe this is something that just is developed through repetition, practice, or do you think it's like a natural thing that one is just kind of born with? What have been your experiences?
I think practice makes perfect.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, so in order to get a full-time in a consulting firm, maybe, I don't know how many cases have you guys done, but I did 50. So, yeah.
That's usually a good ballpark number.
Yeah, so.
But this is something that I believe, and I know some people like Dipping might not necessarily believe the exact same thing. Repetition won't do it all, though. It's like the phrase "practice makes perfect" isn't quite right. It's perfect practice makes perfect. So the key here is that you want to be practicing quality, not just quantity. So as you're going through, that might mean redoing cases. That might mean making your structure better, but then actually understanding why your first structure was terrible in the first place. Because with that, you start to learn. The other thing that Jipping and I did a lot of was Jipping would read the Wall Street Journal, and he'd come with a topic, and we would discuss. And we'd just kind of talk about the topic to some extent. And what that tends to do is at least get your business acumen a little bit up. You don't need to have it perfect, but you should understand some basics.
And talking about business, I feel like it's quite different from talking about your research project. There are some specific ways of talking about that. Probably it's more like, what's the problem and what's the current state, of the, let's say, the current trend of a specific industry, and what kind of problem you want to solve. What are some companies that are focusing on those problems? So talking about the business is more like specific training that you have to go through while you are doing the case or talking about business or day-to-day life.
This once again echoing something if you went to the info session or if you didn't, the idea that you should be able to tie some concepts back to maybe some kind of personal experience that you've had or that you know. So just a simple example, right? If we start talking about vertically integrating, okay, then you might want to talk about SpaceX for a little bit, right? The concept of what they're trying to do with vertically integrating spaceship manufacturing. Just simply mentioning that, mentioning maybe some of the troubles that they have doing that, you start to show the interviewer, oh, this person actually sort of gets it and at least knows a little bit about it. And then that way they can understand that you didn't just read it out of a book. You've heard it before. You've seen it.
And just to give you guys a little bit more information, so I think before my Insight interview, I did about 20 to 25 cases. That's the number that I did before that time.
And I probably did like 4.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily have to do a ton of cases at that point. Oh, and before we forget, if you do get to the phone interview for either the Bridge to BCG or the Insight program, that does get you typically a first round pass through to the first round.
Not necessarily for BCG, I know.
Yeah, so I mean there's a giant asterisk on that, even for McKinsey too, because they've changed their format a little bit. But I know for us that happened. So, like for instance, I know you got a first round interview at BCG.
You can think of it as, so they look at your resume and they think, okay, so you have a pretty good background. We invite you for an interview, and they interview you. If you're really good, they invite you to the program. If they think you are okay, they will give you the first round guarantee for the full-time job. If they think you don't really have a potential, probably they won't invite you
So they will inform you during the interview to the
afterwards.
Yeah.
After interview, they will
Yeah.
tell you you are not admitted to the inside, but you.
Yeah,
first
exactly.
Exactly.
Which can be kind of nice. Then that way, like I know for McKinsey, they have that the PEI, I think is what it's called. Yeah, it can be.
Personal experience interview.
Yeah, so it's like that one can be kind of weird. So it's a nice little perk.
And even being invited for the interview is actually not easy, because I think 90% of the students cannot be invited, and 90% of the applicants actually will not be invited for the interview.
Which interview?
I mean,
Well, any of them. Really.
Full-time interviews or the inside program.
But the nice part is being at Duke, that name carries a lot of weight. There's a reason that Jesse comes specifically to Duke to give an info session. They think that there's a lot of potential here at Duke.
Yeah.
So that is nice, and that does carry a lot of weight, but that's only going to get your foot in the door, possibly.
Yeah, so that's the concept of target school.
Yeah.
I think Duke is one of their most important target schools, but a lot of other universities are not.
You got a question?
Yeah, after having interacted with so many of these senior level consultants, having been able to talk to them, see how they think, what are the most common characteristics that you've seen that they possess that are most important for them to succeed at what they do?
That's a good question.
Good question, but I still believe, we talk about the 3 traits, right?
Right.
That's very important. And if you talk to a lot of consultants, you actually can know that they talk in a specific way. They behave in a specific and actually similar way. That's why a lot of consultants are interchangeable. And for a specific team, they will just staff people randomly. And they believe even they are staffed randomly, they still can function well. So it's more like Lego, right? Lego is very predictable. It has a very specific trait. And when you put them together, you'll get something.
But now there are some traits that don't fall into that.
Mhm,
So
of course.
just to give you an example, right? So Steven was one of the consultants that was there, very energetic, very wants to be hands-on, extroverted. I got the chance to interact with a guy named Eric. He was also there. Very introverted, quiet, reserved. But when you talk to him, he was very knowledgeable. So that idea that Tipping's mentioning, that Lego block, they are going to be Lego blocks, but they're going to be different colors. They might be slightly different shapes. But at the end of the day, the concept remains the same, that they can take some of the most difficult problems in business and boil them down to their core constituents and then funnel out a solution. The other big thing is that they can think on their feet and handle pressure. So they actually kind of test this as well at Insight to some extent. So when we had those interviews that I was mentioning with, say, the CFO or the CEO, they would come in and they would do the interview, yes, but they would intentionally come in with some sort of trait. So for instance, the CEO would come in and would be like, why do we care about this? The company's doing just fine. Why are you even here? Like, this is stupid. Just here, I'll give you some stuff, but then I'll leave. And the CFO comes in and he's totally pissed off because everything's going down the drain and everything costs too much money and what's wrong with everybody else. So you have to learn how to deal with those kinds of things in a effective manner. And so if there's traits that we're looking at that each of them had, it's that they can all take a complex problem and make it simpler, structure it correctly, and they can also handle pressure and think on their feet.
Right, so I agree with Matt. So when you talk to a consultant, even though you ask them really simple questions like how do you like the company, they'll give you an answer in a really structured way. Like they will say, I like the company in 3 ways: company culture, work-life balance, and work stuff. And they start talking about each section. So this is like how you do a case, and this is how consultants think. So structure is really important in consulting.
And one of the best ways that you can practice this right now is literally in the work that you do today. So one of the things that some people might not have in their lab, or if you're a master's student, in the research that you do, is an inherent structure to the problem that you're solving. Have you sat down in the past 3 months and actually asked yourself, what is the problem that I'm actually solving? How am I solving it? And what are the 3 to 4 ideas that I'm trying to use to solve it? Could you do that in the next 10 minutes? If you can't, then you need to practice to a point where you can, right? So you've done that for 2, 3, 4 years. Imagine if you're a consultant, you've done it for a week and you're expected to structure it that quickly. So something to watch out for and something to try out.
You can try that in your day-to-day life. For example, in the group meeting I have with my advisor, I use a similar technology. Like those are the 3 things I'd like to talk about, A, B, C. And I believe the X, Y, Z are the solutions for the 3. So I list that at the very beginning of my presentation, which is quite different from our usual approach of presentations, right? But that's something that you can do in your day life, or pick up a phone, talk to your mom. Hi, mom, I'd like to talk about 1, 2, 3, 3 things today, right?
It sounds weird.
It sounds weird, but that's how consultants talk.
And it's also something where it sounds weird to you now, but imagine doing that with your mom, how natural that's going to become. Pretty soon your mom's going to tell you to stop numbering things, okay? So inevitably it will start to become ingrained and it will help you.
Exactly.
Any other questions? Yeah?
So in general, I get that a lot of these consulting firms are recruiting just broadly intellectually curious people who are talented in many different ways. But do they try to draw upon your particular talents, like maybe what kind of PhD program or master's program that you're in, and utilize those skills for the company? Or do you kind of just get thrown into, whatever team because you can do it, because you're capable?
What do you think? You're the one who's going to...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I think you're asking about what kind of PhD programs are stronger in terms of application, right?
Well, no, what I'm asking is that do they try to use your talents that you have already had in your experience that you've had in school?
Definitely they will. So they take a look at your resume, that your past experience, and also your degree. So I don't know how they see your resume, but definitely they can see your talent from your resume. And
So like you're a statistics master, is that
Yes.
right? So are they going to try to use you in more numerical?
I don't think so. In
quantitative?
that way, no. So because consulting firm, they accept people from different kinds of degrees. They even accept people from like art history majors, but they don't necessarily use their major talent.
Right.
But they just want smart people. They want people who are passionate about consulting, and in terms of I don't think the name of the degree really matters, but the classes you've taken, the things you've done during the period of time you're acquiring that degree matters more, I think. Yeah.
I asked several consultants in BCG and McKinsey about the question. So they told me that they were generally looking for all these, I call it generic skills, like communication skills, analytical skills, and teamwork skills, which you develop through your PhD training or your other trainings, but not necessarily your specialty, your mechanical engineering or statistics, because you will be assigned to different projects, either consuming goods or healthcare. When a consultant graduated from our department, he told me that within the 1.5 year in McKinsey, he was assigned to 5 projects, from consumer goods to WAN, because he was working on aviation research, so only one of the projects, some related to aviation, but all the others nothing related.
And I mean, and also to kind of put that in perspective too, so I used to work with a person who went to work with McKinsey, and he did about 3 to 6 projects with McKinsey. Wanted to stay for 2 years, but then ended up only staying for 1 because Mr. Elon Musk said, hey, come work at SpaceX. So he's like, okay. So I mean, he did work with helicopters and ended up going to sort of a business like that. Steven did the same exact thing. He's in DC now, working with aerospace and defense effectively. So I mean, it really depends. One of the things that McKinsey also offers is a McKinsey expert. So after about, say, 2 to 3 years, some consultants decide to, instead of continuing to go out on projects, they stay basically in home and become an expert on a topic of some sort. By doing research on that topic for McKinsey, by answering questions for other consultants that have questions about it. So it really depends on the route you want to take. It could be something totally different, or it might end up being in the same region.
I wanted to ask about this Insight program because I heard that like there was one for engineering students and the other one for medical students.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just mentioned that they don't really care about your major and your like core abilities as PhD students, then why do they offer these programs for specifically for engineering students? Were you working on engineering industry or
Engineering and science.
Yeah, and this year I think they even generalized that a bit. They call that STEM program. So if you are a part of this kind of STEM program, you'll be considered as eligible of applying.
I mean, are they more interested in science people or?
I think not necessarily. Just maybe that's just my guess. If you have this kind of STEM background, your analytical skills might be a little bit
Okay.
stronger than the rest. So they're trying to probe the high probability group,
Okay.
right?
So during your experience in the Insight program, were you working on something that is related to your major?
No,
No,
Okay.
not at all.
no, wasn't even. I mean, it was remotely sort of the same. It's
Mhm.
basically about computers.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you work with computers, right? Almost every day.
They picked the case. They picked the case from essentially their database of cases that they've done before, modify it slightly, make it a bit simpler, and then give it to you.
So when you talk about you interviewed the CEOs, they were real CEOs or?
No. So they were I mean,
Okay.
maybe they were at some point in their life, but no. So they were
Okay.
They were actual consultants that were staffed for Insight.
Oh, okay.
Is what they did. But they were acting as if they were the CEO.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, before I forget, so when you were asked that question, right? Did you notice the first thing that he did wasn't to answer the question, it was to clarify what the question was?
Oh, yeah.
That's another huge thing when you do consulting, right? Because if you would have answered the question based off of what you thought the question was, we would have wasted 5 minutes, and who wants to waste 5 minutes, right?
It's getting awkward, like nobody's understand what I'm talking about.
Right, exactly. And anyways,
Yeah.
So talking about the previous question, so what you have learned, like what the skills you have acquired under your PhD training or master training, have you ever used any of those experience in your interview?
I think if you receive PhD training, you're probably good at analytical thinking.
Yeah, what I
and
mean is, have you ever used it?
like real experience, like
Yeah, have you ever mentioned that in your interview? Like if the interviewer asks like, any random questions they have asked, have you ever used that as evidence to support yourself instead of like I did something in consulting club with that?
So I think for me, okay, so since I'm a master, I think the most useful things for me to do a master is I can do the calculation faster. So
Mhm.
when you're doing the case, you have a lot of data, a lot of numbers. Maybe you want to calculate the revenue, you want to calculate if they're making money or not, and you have to do that in a really short period of time. And the faster you do, the more you're able to impress the interviewer. So in terms of, like you mentioned, if I used any statistical methods or statistical data to support my...
No, I think he meant that.
No, what I
Did you
meant-
use it in your fit interview questions? Did you mention?
You can use that, but I didn't.
Yeah, so now to give you a different light,
Yeah.
right? So when I went to my final round BCG interview, by the way, when you go to these interviews, typically they will give you information about your interviewers. So it's not like you're going to walk in blind about these people. I noticed that the person that was interviewing me was a senior partner, but he did a lot of work with the Navy, and he had a lot of naval training, even went to the Air Force for a little while for some reason. Naturally, I work on helicopters, so we got on the subject of helicopters. And to answer your question, yes, I did use my research, but what I ended up doing was kind of abstracting it. We talked about a time where I had to solve a really difficult problem. He knew things like, what does it mean to stall an airfoil? What's viscous versus inviscid? Like, he knew that. So we were able to kind of talk a little bit more in depth about it. But beyond that very specific case, probably not. But abstracting it, you could still talk about a difficult problem that you solved. It's just you have to know your audience, which takes me to another big point about any sort of interview. You need to know your audience. If you're walking in there with somebody who obviously doesn't care about the nitty-gritty details and just wants an answer, you should just give them an answer, right? So knowing your audience is going to help you a lot as well.
Exactly. Sometimes, the interviewers might be interested in your research and they may want you to tell them a little bit about that. You can give them a short version, and if they are really interested, they will probably ask you an extended version, right? So.
Yeah, but what I was asking is not like presenting my research to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's still like tailored to answer their questions. For example, like what kind of problem you have solved regarding like teamwork. For example, you have a big team in your research. Like, so all these sorts of problems, you may have similar experience, but under the context of your research in the lab,
Sure.
for example, will
Sure,
you
we can use
use those as evidence?
But notice how you actually phrased it yourself, right?
Mhm.
You phrased it as teamwork, and there was a problem in the team.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was about your research, and that's kind of the minute context. But then you immediately went into what they really care about, which is what's the problem, what was your role, how what was the anticipated outcome. Now we're getting into kind of STAR, or if any of you read Victor Chang, it's parade, same concept. But that's what they care about.
Mhm.
The fact that it was in your research, cool, but maybe not so important.
My understanding is whatever experience you are going to use, you are going to leverage, have to help you to demonstrate all these skills they are looking for. So you need to formulate in kind of for you.
Yeah.
Tell a story in a way that will help you, right?
And can't stress it enough, you need to practice your stories. A lot of people do the cases and then they forget the stories. That's going to lose you the job. In fact, stories sometimes are a lot more important.
Right, that's why I said fit interview is sometimes more important than casing.
Yeah. And that's something where, if you meet somebody at these case practice sessions, or you use something like the case practice directory, and you meet somebody to do cases, you might as well do fit with them too. And it's actually not that bad, because a lot of times some case books that you'll read will even have some example fit questions. Or you can literally make one up. They can be as vague as you want to. Tell me about a time when you worked with an individual and something went wrong. They just make something up and then tell the story. So.
I have a very specific question about this application to Insight program. I noticed that it says that you are going to answer 2 essay questions.
Not for Insight, I believe.
Yeah, I read it somewhere, but what kind of questions, and is it in a limited time you have to answer it in the website, or
Probably
something?
not. It's
Okay.
probably going to be that if they did change it, which maybe they did, it'll be something like you'll open it up, and there'll probably be the questions, and you can probably do them in a Word
Yeah.
format.
You can prepare that for weeks.
Oh, okay, I see.
It's not going to start a ticking timer
Yeah,
and then it
no.
submits after that.
No, it's not GRE test.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
How do you improve upon the on-site with the case practice? Like, what is your approach like?
Quantitative side, right?
Yeah.
Are you saying about the math part, calculation?
Yeah.
I think McKinsey, they have a quantitative practice, like a set of practices that you can find online so that you can practice calculating the numbers. And if you're interested in improving the speed of the calculation, you can even go to, I think there's a website for traders.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Heard
you
of
can
that.
go there. I think this traders. Yeah, just apply. Just search. Just Google it, and you have a lot of math questions like what is 33 times 48, and that might help.
Depending on how deep you want to go down that rabbit
Yeah.
hole, because that is one way to do it, is to
Yeah,
just
that's what I did. So, but
it's just, like for me, that's too much thinking.
Mhm.
So it's like, what was your number? I don't even remember.
I just made it up.
Well, so for me, like, I look at it and go, if I can't do it simply in my head, then I got a round immediately.
Right.
Just like, if it's 13, I'm not even touching it. It's 15. It's close enough.
Or you can just do 10.
Or 10.
Yeah.
Like like for me, it's more about the estimation. If you really want to go down that rabbit hole, there's a really good book for that called Guesstimation, which it teaches you how to estimate. And the nice part about this book is that they give you examples of things like how many rolls of toilet paper would you need to encircle the globe, right? So it's a ludicrous question, but it forces you to think about estimating certain things like, what's the radius of the Earth, how much square footage is on a toilet paper roll, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, or shameless plug. A year ago, actually, we did a training session, and in one of the sessions, I believe we talked about mental math
Oh yes.
and more like sizing problems. And it's on YouTube channel. You can watch that for free.
I think I did that one.
No, you didn't.
I didn't?
No.
Oh, okay. I estimated that I did it. It was close enough.
Your team did.
By the way, those are actually really helpful too. That's why we filmed them, so you can use them when you want to help you to get your footing started. Does that answer your question? Awesome. Anything else? All right.
All right, I guess that's it.
Cool.